It's good to be with you. It's good to get to share the word today. This Sunday is commonly called Christ the King Sunday, but officially in the Episcopal Church it's just the last Sunday after Pentecost. The Roman Catholics and the Lutherans have adopted it officially with the title Christ the King Sunday. We've chosen the lessons and the prayer that goes with that theme, but we haven't named it that. I think partially because there's some problems with kingship, with king as metaphor. Our earthly models of what it means to be royalty leave a lot to be desired. The British don't do too bad, but they don't have much power. And they do primarily get a lot of scandals, which is troubling in the image of kingship. And then there's the Japanese royalty who gave up divinity but remains royal, except you're not allowed to mix with commoners. So Princess Mako this past week, who married a commoner after a long engagement, had to resign her title and her position in the royal family. And then you get to countries like Thailand, where it's absolutely forbidden to in any way criticize the king, to criticize the queen, to criticize the crown prince, to criticize anybody of the royal family, to criticize any former kings, and finally, and probably not least, it is against the law to criticize any pets that belong to the royals. And these are punishable by fines and harsh imprisonments. So there are some problems with kingship. There's also the problem with, in this reading that we just had from John's Gospel, we don't know what Jesus means when he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Now there are there are numerous images from the Bible of God enthroned in glory as a king, as an ancient one, in the Daniel reading. As God coming empowered in the clouds, as in the Revelation reading. There are these images of Christ in a kingship type role. And they are powerful images. But I question if that's what Jesus really has in mind. I wanted to share with you that this is a typical picture of the Christ the King image. I just don't quite see Jesus dressed like this. This is bringing very much the human trappings of kingship to Jesus. And Jesus, as we know from reading the Gospels, never fit the expected, projected model that we wanted to hold out for him. I think of Jesus as wearing the crown of thorns and not the golden crown. So my mind turned to the story of the Prince and the Pauper. Originally, it's a Mark Twain story from the mid-1800s. But it's been remade any number of times in movies and retold and in stories and all. If you remember, a prince and a pauper encounter each other. They realize they're almost twinish in their identity, and the prince suggests that they trade places for a while. The prince leaves sort of a key that will get him back in and prove his royalty over the other boy, though the other boy's never going to challenge it, I don't believe, in the story. So the prince goes and lives the life of the pauper. First, he is embedded in the family of the pauper, which is dominated by an abusive alcoholic father. It is an oppressive place. He begins to feel the poverty of the people. He escapes from there onto the street. There he sees the unjust criminal system. He sees the exploitation of people. He sees the true way the other side lives. And he's moved and touched by it. As the story ends, the prince returns to the castle, and now because his father, the king, has died, he returns to be king, and it is said that he rules with mercy. But I have this thought of Jesus having walked among us, shared the thorns of life, and maybe some of the triumphs of life. Would he abandon us for the palace? Because no matter how good the king is not going to raise up everyone. I think of Jesus in the story in Matthew's where he says, they said, "When did we serve you, Lord?" And he says, "When you fed the hungry, gave water to the thirsty, visited the sick, visited those in prison, clothed the naked." Jesus would remain of us. Jesus would remain a part of us. He would choose the crown of thorns or the crown of gold every time. Jesus wants to embrace fully the human experience, not half-heartedly. He wasn't just sort of playing around here for a few years to see what it'd be like to be human. He came to embrace the fullness of humanity. And that's what he came to embrace. And in doing so, he will never leave that fullness of our humanity as he calls us to the fullness of the ideal of the humanity we might be. As he calls us to the fullness of our potential. As he calls us to the fullness of what some call our better angels. We do it through owning and embracing our brokenness and our challenges and our difficulties. Jesus, I think, might be the pauper king. He might be the thorn or crown kings. But I just don't see him as the regal king.